we all deserve to own our power. And, there's a transformative element of fashion. We dress to communicate to the world who we are and what we stand for. And I want to create clothes that help women to communicate to the world that they are a powerful force and that they are not going to be underestimated, that we are here to take up our space.
You're listening to The Creative Impostor, episode number 23. Welcome to the Creative Impostor podcast. I'm Andrea Clunder, your host. Today, I am excited to bring you our very first interview with someone who shares my name. Andrea Newberry is the founder of Leche Libre, which is a fashion design company that is redefining the power suit for women everywhere, but specifically for breastfeeding moms. Now, don't turn this off if you're not a mom, if you're not breastfeeding, and if you're not into fashion, because Andrea has some awesome insight to share about being a woman in this day and age and quote unquote having it all in terms of family, personal life, and business. We talk about burnout and how to prevent it with nurturing and self-care. And we talk about the excitement of launching something new, taking a huge risk, and doing a Kickstarter campaign. But before we get into all of that, let's find out what exactly is Leche Libre all about.
So Leche Libre is a urban brand of apparel which empowers women to confidently breastfeed wherever they want, wherever they go in style. I created Leche Libre because after the birth of my two children, I was breastfeeding for years and years straight. And it was very difficult to find clothing that was specifically made for breastfeeding that was also stylish. All of the breastfeeding specific apparel was very frumpy. And I felt like I was struggling with losing my identity a little bit. Your life changes when you have a child. And I was trying to figure out who I was as this new woman and a mother. I was learning to sew at the time. And so I decided that I should make some clothing for breastfeeding to make it easier. And I had some vintage patterns and I sewed some patterns and altered them slightly to put zippers along the bust lines. And whenever I would go out, people would see me wearing them and realize that they were for breastfeeding, and people got really excited about them. Sort of a bold choice at the time since I didn't have any sort of background in fashion whatsoever. But I realized there was a huge gap in the market and there were a lot of women that were struggling. Breastfeeding in public is stressful and difficult. The clothing just kind of formed another obstacle. I just knew that there was a need to get clothing out into the world that made it easier for women to be themselves as individuals and represent themselves and their sense of style through their clothing while being able to be the best mom that they could be in the way they wanted to do it.
I have to say that when I met you and you told me what you were doing, I thought it was very cool. I am not a mom. And I went to your website and looked at your clothes and I was like, those are really cute. I would wear those, except I do not need easy access to my breasts for any reason that I can think of.
Get a little creative and maybe you can come up with a few options.
But I really love the style and the look of the clothes that you're making. Could you describe a little bit what your personal style is and how you integrated that into the line?
My aesthetic is very edgy and sort of punk rock. And I definitely try and put in those themes of kind of being more hard-edged into my apparel. How I originally was thinking about it was that breastfeeding apparel really isn't its own established niche. It's sort of part of maternity. All of the clothing in those areas are very soft and delicate, and I personally am not that soft or delicate. My mother-in-law always says that I'm as demure as a dump truck, and I wanted to present a different aesthetic for motherhood. I like to insert more masculine themes And it's just funny because I've been using the terms feminine to describe soft and delicate, and then masculine is like more hard and powerful. But really, we culturally have these very gendered stereotypes. And I've been trying to separate my wording away from those gendered words. But when I'm designing the clothes, I'm trying to insert more powerful and strong imagery into my inspirational process. And I feel as though it's this theme that's transcending just motherhood, because as you said, a lot of women look at my stuff and they say, oh, I really like that. I really like your designs. I'm not breastfeeding, but I would wear that anyways. About 20% of the sales I make go to women who do not breastfeed. They just like the dresses. If women feel beautiful in my clothes, that's great. But my number one goal is to make women feel powerful and strong. And we have the ability, whether we choose to do it or not, we have the ability to do the most powerful thing a human being can do. Giving birth and sustaining life through breastfeeding is the most powerful thing. And the women that I'm making my clothing for, it's like, well, they just did that. We all deserve to own our power. And, there's a transformative element of fashion. We dress to communicate to the world who we are and what we stand for. And I want to create clothes that help women to communicate to the world that they are a powerful force and that they are not going to be underestimated, that we are here to take up our space.
Just now in my mind, I'm thinking you are redefining the power suit. I'm like imagining the trend that existed at a certain time of these more masculine lines in feminine business pantsuits, shoulder pads and stuff, things like that, and how your line is not that, thankfully, but it is a very strong, powerful aesthetic, and that comes across even though the shapes are dresses and jumpers and are flattering to the feminine figure. I love the idea of redefining what power and strength looks like through fashion. And just a few moments ago, you had mentioned when you first became a mom, feeling disconnected from your identity or feeling like you had to redefine who you were, how the clothes that were available to you did not really support you in that. I think there's something to a lot of what you said of breastfeeding clothes being more maternity clothes, the idea of, oh, you're just staying home with baby and you're not really going out in public and you're not really seen. You're kind of like behind the scenes. Whereas the clothes that you're making are for going out and being on the go and being in public and doing your thing.
The thing that's really coming to my mind is women are always filtered through the lens of how men see us. And women, before you have children, we're sexualized, our bodies are objectified, everything is about how beautiful we are. And then we have babies and all of a sudden, well, we're no longer sex objects at that point. Then we're like old lady moms and we need to just stay out of sight. And I'm generalizing, but there's certain residue of that that's still part of our culture. Up until my daughter, she's my oldest, was born, I was living in Chicago. I was working. I had this dynamic life, going out with friends, bipping around town, going to bars at nights and shows and whatnot. And then I got pregnant. The economy was down because it was 2010, and I lost my job when I was pregnant. Couldn't find another job. It's not easy to find a job when you're pregnant. And anyway, my life completely shifted. I was the first one of my friends to have a baby, and I didn't know what it looked like to be an urban mom. I was at a loss of like who I was supposed to be then, and I felt like a lot of the messages I was getting was that I should just stay home and it didn't matter what I looked like, and that wasn't important anymore. Yeah, it made me feel like I lost my relevancy to a certain extent, that I as an individual didn't matter anymore. The only thing that was important was me being a caretaker to this new human. And I felt like that was very difficult to deal with. Moving forward, then years later, now I'm making these clothes and I'm just thinking about what I'm trying to build Leche Libre into. And I just think that it's really, really important to assert our sense of self. As women, I feel like there's a lot we're taught that we sort of need to ask for permission for everything. And I just kind of want to be a voice out there giving women permission to take care of ourselves and nurture our personal identities and ourselves as much as we're nurturing our children's. When you were talking before about the power suit, I was like, yeah, I really like that. I never thought of that term before with terms of my clothes. I love the idea of like the power suit redefined as breastfeeding apparel. And breastfeeding is this super feminine thing, but that's some of the amazing thing about women is we are very nurturing, but that doesn't mean that we're weak, like nurturing can be powerful. And I'm definitely going to think about the power suit more and how that plays into what I'm doing.
You can name a piece after me in your new line.
And
only everyone will think that you've named it after yourself since we have the same name. So in thinking about this idea of nurturing and power and being out in the world, even after you've become a mom and redefining yourself, I talked with a previous guest who is a businesswoman. She's an entrepreneur and she has not yet had children, but she's thinking about it. And we were talking about this idea in society of whether women can have it all, meaning, be a mom and have a family and be nurturing and also still have a career or build a business. And how do we balance those two things? Do you have any thoughts on being a mom, creating this family, and also building this design business that you've created?
Yes, I do. I have many thoughts on that. I think that having it all it's very relative. I think that it is possible to have it all within reason. It's all about setting your priorities and knowing what it is you're willing to do. We have like a finite amount of energy that we have to dole out each day and a finite amount of hours to make things happen. And we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves. As women in business, it's hard in the sense that there's a certain amount of pressure to perform, like we have to be just as good or perform just as well as men, even though women still perform the lion's share of childcare and household duties when they're in a partnership. And so my view of having it all means I love being a mother. It's like my true vocation is being a mother. I was a stay-at-home mom for a few years, though, and it was soul-sucking because I didn't have the creative outlet. I can't be completely a caregiver all the time. I need things for myself. For me, it's like the balance comes into play when I think about I want to be a mom and I also want to run my own business. But if I allow other people's standards of how they do things to play into my life, if I start playing the game of comparing myself to other people, whether it be other moms or other women in business or anyone in business in general, it's like an immediate shoot straight into like depression. So when I think about balance, I've had to really think about redefining my own experience and owning what I want to do as a mother and what I do well, and then what I want to do as a business woman and what I can do well. I have friends who are amazing moms in the sense that they play with their children and they take them places to the parks and to museums every day and do fun art projects all the time. And I'm not exactly that kind of mom. I try to do as much with them as I can, but there's lots of times where I am working at home and they're with me and they are just entertaining themselves or watching TV. And that's how I parent. That's the mother that I am. And I try to own that and not say, oh, I'm such a bad mom for letting my kids watch 4 hours of TV in the morning while I'm doing work. It's summer vacation right now. So how I've been balancing it out is I do my work in the morning and they watch TV or do whatever. And then in the afternoon, I try to do what work that I can do on my phone or with a notebook and whatever that I don't need to be at home on the computer. And then I'll take them to the park or the pool and I'll do my work there and they'll be out playing around. But I try not to be hard on myself. I just try to accept responsibility for the choices that I made. And then on the other side with business, there's a lot of pressure when you start a business that you need to grow a certain speed and you need to get X number of followers on Instagram and you need to be getting all this traction and what your sales and this and that. I've been doing this very slow, lean startup approach. So I've been launched for like, a year and a half now. And I went through a phase when I was really, really beating myself up, looking at other fashion brands. And it was really poisoning my attitude about my business because I was like, well, I need to like be selling out right away, and I need to be getting write-ups and all this press, and I need to be getting in the New York Times and whatever unrealistic expectations that I had. And I just didn't have the time to be pursuing that. I'm a one-woman shop. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I don't have any additional childcare. And I had to get real about what choices I was making. I just had to say, you know what? The whole point of starting my own business is to create my own culture. I can do it however I want. And I wouldn't have this business if I wasn't a mom. I never would have started it. If you had told me 5 years ago I'd be doing fashion, I would have laughed in your face. I have no background in fashion. I started this completely because of my experiences in motherhood. I had to sit down with myself and say, I am going to reject the negative information that I'm absorbing from the world around me that's making me feel less than, and I'm just going to own my choices. But I think it all comes down to sitting down and really taking a hard look at what you want, what are your priorities that have nothing to do with anyone else, that have nothing to do with shoulds or woulds or coulds, but are just our own authentic selves speaking about what feeds us, and then creating our lives from there. And then when the hard times come up of things that we have to sacrifice or we feel like we aren't doing so well, to just sit down and be gentle with ourselves and say, you know what, this is really hard, but that doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. I just have to be in the moment and say, it's hard right now. I'm struggling, but I love myself. I love what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep going.
You said you started this line about a year and a half ago. How old are your kids?
My daughter is 6 and my son is 4. I started making the clothes for myself after my son was born, and then I spent a couple years developing it. Well, I spent a couple years learning how to do fashion design. I was watching Project Runway and YouTube videos and stuff, trial and error. And then I finally got a few designs and I was like, I'm just going to work to launch. And so then I started, learning the fashion business side. And then it was in December of 2014 that I launched with 2 designs and just with pre-sales. Sold enough to fund my first production run, and then I've just been slowly building. And now this summer, I'm doing a Kickstarter to fundraise for my first large-scale production run. So I've redesigned my collection, and I have 3 looks that represent a complete wardrobe for a breastfeeding woman.
How are you feeling about that Kickstarter launch?
Oh, I'm, going through these incredibly high and low waves of confidence and complete self-doubt. I want to be successful. I want to meet my goal. But the main thing that I've been focusing on for this Kickstarter is how I've been defining success. I want to move through the experience of preparing for it and enjoy the process. I don't know. I've never done a Kickstarter before. I just want to explore into business and explore into this Kickstarter experience. And I want to maintain my life. I want to maintain my work-life balance and enjoy time with my family. I'm a recovering workaholic, I'd say. And there were times in the past where I would just, be like, well, I'm doing this big thing and everything else has to get set by the wayside. Becoming a mom has really helped me to shift my priorities to say, my personal life is important too. So success in this Kickstarter means that I will prepare for it, launch it, and then move through the aftermath of it in whatever way, whether it's I succeed and then I go through a couple months of manufacturing, or it doesn't go through and I go through the experience of regrouping. But I want to go through that whole experience being in the moment, in the process, and enjoying my life. I think in the past, I was always trying to get through things. When I launched the first time and was doing pre-sales, I was like, I just need to get through this couple weeks. Or when my babies were small and my son, my second child, he was just a very fussy, colicky baby. And I had some postpartum depression after he was born. And I just remember being like, I just need to get through this. I just need to get through this. Life will be better later. I don't want to live my life that way. There's always an excuse. There's always something to be gotten through. You get through one thing and then there's another thing that you need to get through. And I don't want to get through my life.
Are there any special tools or processes or resources that you've drawn from or that you're using to help focus that energy and redirect?
I started going to therapy a year ago, which going to therapy was incredibly helpful just to have someone there to, again, it sounds silly, women needing permission, but I felt like I needed someone to give me permission to like care for myself. I remember I sat down with him and he was like, I hear you talking about your family and what you need to do for your family. And then I hear you talking about your business and what you're doing for your business. But where are you? What are you doing for yourself? And I'm like, well, I'm doing the business for myself. Like I started doing the business because I didn't have any creative outlet and I needed to do that for myself. So the business is what I do for myself. And he's like, no, the business is what you're doing over here. And yes, it's creative. And yes, you're doing it for a job. What are you doing to like feed yourself? But for me, it's like a lot of journaling on when I'm feeling stressed out or when I enter into these negative cycles. The other thing that I do a lot to rechannel my energy is I really like to bicycle. We don't have a car. We're like the kooky people riding around Chicago in the Bachfiets family bike. I try to get out and, ride my bike with the kids or ride my bike and be outside and be in nature. And I'm not working. I'm not stressed out. I'm just riding and I can just focus on riding my bike. It's so silly to say, but like prior to going to therapy, I never prioritized that. I was just like, oh, you're feeling bad? You're not working hard enough. Come on. I would turn on myself. And that doesn't work.
That sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah. Saying like, oh man, I'm feeling bad. I'm going to listen to myself. Like I'm going to listen to my body. Maybe I'm pushing myself too hard right now. Workaholism is such an interesting condition. We live in this culture where addictive behaviors are really vilified. It's like the war on drugs and alcoholism and whatever it might be, smoking, blah, 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 all these various addictive behaviors. But the one that is enabled and promoted is workaholism. And our corporate environment, this capitalist environment that we live in, it's like they are the drug dealers. They are dealing this poisonous mentality. And people brag about it like, oh, yeah, I only got 3 hours of sleep last night. Particularly in the entrepreneurial world, it's poisonous. I just got a pre-membership to this business incubator and I went to their orientation and they were like, we don't have many rules here, but these are the 2 or 3 rules or guidelines that we go by. And the first rule was like, work incessantly. And as an entrepreneur, you'll just know that that's just what you need to do. I was just sitting there and I was like, I'm not going to work incessantly. How gross. No, that's the worst. That's, I can't be successful in my life if I'm defining myself by what I produce. Whenever you set your self-worth as an external thing, it never works because there's always somebody who's going to have more. We have to own our values as completely internal and intrinsic to ourselves. I feel like with the workaholism, that environment, it leads to all these paths of comparing yourself to other people. And then you feel like a phony and then you feel like a creative imposter. I feel like constantly needing to remove myself from that and be like, no, I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm following my own inner path. And it's difficult. It's very, very difficult in our culture to separate out because the workaholic attitude is you need to work all the time. That's how you prove to everyone that you're valuable as you work. And when you're not working as hard as you can, then you have no value. And so when you reject that and you step outside of it, it's like there's this constant voice that I have to fight. It's like, you're not doing enough. And I just have to say, all right, well, thanks for your input. I don't agree with you. I'm not going to engage in fighting with you because that's just going to like take energy that I don't have. There have just been so many ways in the past where I've self-sabotaged because I've committed to a project. I really wanted to do it, but then I push myself so hard that I burn out. I get to the point where I can't work and my body is like shutting down. And then I would like slowly build myself back up and then I'd get back in it again. I was pushing myself so hard to achieve something that wasn't really achievable so that inevitably I was always failing and it was separating me from the creative process. These behaviors are very toxic. I had to stop that cycle. I've just tried really hard to say, I'm going to let go of that, and I'm going to build my business at the speed that I can. I'm going to be very much living in the moment and accepting the positive and the negative of all my choices and my priorities. And I'm going to be as present as I can be as a mom. And I'm not going to be pushing myself so hard. I'm going to create space for me to relax and for me to experience my life.
For somebody who is listening to this episode who has an idea for something that she would like to create, and maybe she doesn't have the background, like you didn't have a background in fashion at all, but there was something you wanted that you couldn't find in the world and in the marketplace. And so you decided to create it and to take a risk and put yourself out there. So for someone who has something that she wants to create and is right there on the fence of whether to take the next step or how to take the next step, what advice might you be able to give her?
First of all, everyone should look inside of themselves and try to feel and get in touch with their own inner strength and power, which when we zero in on that, it all of a sudden it opens up choice. And a lot of times people don't move forward with their ideas because of fear, but fear is just a choice. Fear of what other people will think or fear of whether you can do it or not. It's a choice. I think that it's really important to say, I have this idea, I have this concept, I feel very passionately about it. If it's something that feeds you and if it's something that you feel compelled to do, then follow that road. Yeah, there's this amazing Pema Chodron quote. She says, fear is an open and fluid state. So when fear comes up, you can say, oh, this is fear. This is quality of an awakened mind. This is a quality of open space. Instead of giving it a negative name, rephrase it and call it ultimate possibility. You can say, yes, this doesn't feel good, and yes, my knees are shaking, but I'm going to stay with this. I'm interested in knowing this because it'll take me in the direction I want to go and not back into the cocoon of ego clinging. I love this quote so much because rephrasing fear in the context of the creative experience as ultimate possibility, it's been really powerful to me. I feel like fear of the unknown is this very primal state. We all have it. There's nothing we can do about it. It's going to be present whenever we're trying something new. But to be able to embrace it and say, I can almost take the fact that there's fear present as meaning that I'm doing something exciting. I'm doing something that has ultimate possibilities. I would tell whatever person listening to this to make the choice to create not only the project that they're working on, but create their life, because through these projects is how not only do we build our lives, but we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and we become more empowered and more authentic and more actualized. Get out there and make the choice to follow your dreams and follow your path.
Andrea Newberry of Leche Libre, living proof that you can own your choices, step into your power, and create a business that supports your vision for the lifestyle you want to have. You can learn more at lechelibre.com and connect with Andrea on Facebook. And I am super excited to announce that Andrea's Kickstarter campaign for the new Leche Libre collection as of August 8th is fully funded. She surpassed her $20,000 goal in just 7 days, but don't worry, you can still get a piece of the action. If you or someone you know needs support in breastfeeding in style, or my very favorite giving level incentive, a Lucha Libre Mexican wrestling style onesie for baby, find Leche Libre on Kickstarter.com, or you can link from the show notes at thecreativeimposter.com/023. The campaign ends August 31st, so go do it now. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music is by Jovia Armstrong. I'm Andrea Klunder, and hey, do you love this podcast or what? If you are finding value in what we're up to, please subscribe in iTunes or on Stitcher. Share your favorite episode with a friend or colleague, and maybe, just maybe, consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. It means so much more than you know. Also, Who do you know whose story or business should be featured on The Creative Impostor? I'm currently looking for guests and aligned sponsors who have something amazing and unique to contribute to our creative community. Come visit me at thecreativeimpostor.com/guest to learn more or make a recommendation. Thank you, as always, for being here and listening, and I am wishing you a week filled with bold, powerful choices.